All sports have rules. They make sports fair and unpredictable. That's why we like to play them, and that's why we like to watch them. And all sports have some sort of mechanism to prevent and sanction those who break the rules. Sports are also highly competitive, and athletes can be rewarded with huge amounts of money. That creates the ideal environment for opportunistic behavior, such as doping, unless we have effective strategies in place to catch those who cheat and prevent those who want to cheat from doping. We know from research in social sciences and sports psychology that there are various, sometimes overlapping reasons for doping. Some do it because they want to win at all cost. Others might just do it because they need to do it to remain competitive. And athletes have developed very good strategies to justify their opportunistic behavior. We also know that some disciplines and environments are more favorable to cheating. For example, because they require massive amount of strength, or because doping is widespread and accepted, or because athletes are under high pressure to perform to provide for themselves or their families. We know that there are now situations where breaking the rules has become somewhat trivial or even necessary. But we know much less about how efficient doping programs are and how efforts in doping control programs can be better targeted. And that's mostly because there is little experimental evidence to disentangle the effects of various predictors of doping in sports. In this study, I draw on deterrence and rational choice theory on the one hand, and ethical decision-making literature on the other hand. I first examined the more traditional position that increasing threats will reduce cheating. I bring this exploration further by looking into two other explanations for rule breaking in non-criminal environments. I first test how the behavior of others affect rule breaking. That's this idea of everybody's doing it. And I also test how obedience to authority, that's the idea of I was told to do it, affect athletes in their decisions to break the rules. The data comes from a factorial vignette study that was constructed to examine factors associated with athletes' decisions to use performance-enhancing drugs. The survey was administered to 343 athletes participating in the Winter Youth Olympic Games in Lausanne in January 2020. All athletes were between 14 and 18 years old. Engagement with the study was very high, and response rate was 87%. Vignette studies are powerful methods because they can be experimentally manipulated, which allows to parse cause and effect. They've been used quite extensively in other behavioral sciences, but as far as I know, this is the first time that this methodology has been used in the context of doping and rule breaking in sports. Each participant was randomly provided with one variation of a vignette describing a typical anti-doping rule violation. The vignettes were manipulated in order to test for increasing threats of sanction, increasing the acceptability among peers of doping behavior, and increasing the pressure on athletes to use performance-enhancing substances. Participants had to read the scenario, and after reading the scenario, were asked to picture themselves in the position of the athlete described in the scenario, and rank how likely they thought they would have acted like the athlete described in the scenario. They were also asked how morally acceptable they thought the action of the athlete in the scenario was. This was followed by a set of questions that tapped athletes' perception of various aspects associated with deterrence. We also tapped prior behavior and general attitudes towards doping. Now, what I found is that in high-pressure environment, particularly when someone the athlete trusts, such as a trainer, incentivized the athlete to break anti-doping rules, that was reflected in respondents' answer, in their willingness and propensity to dope. Surprisingly, however, when we increased the threats of sanctions, or when we increased the acceptability among peers and teammates of doping, that was not reflected in athletes' answer and propensity to dope. Now, why does this matter? Almost all of us sometimes break the rules. We speed on the highway, we cross on red, we tweak our tax returns, and we're very good at realigning our moral compass to accommodate some kind of rule bending. Now, not all cheating is the same, but there are strong indications that athletes also weigh the pros and cons when they make their decisions to break the rules, and that their decisions are affected by their environment. What this study provides is an initial indication that it may be more efficient, particularly when dealing with young athletes, to target our anti-doping efforts towards the creation of a low-pressure environment, rather than simply increasing the threats of sanctions. If we want to design efficient anti-doping programs, we certainly need more research to characterize a situation in which rule breaking is most likely to occur. But there are two good news here. It appears that young athletes have generally adopted a very strong anti-doping stance. That means reinforcing the values of drug-free sports is important, but it may not be the key to better compliance. The other good news is that there are meaningful policy options and intervention for anti-doping organizations. Measures, for example, can aim at increasing the engagement of the entire sports community, including those who support athletes and manage the environment in which they perform.